Well, hello, and welcome to Morning Call for Friday, the 24th of May, 2019. I'm Fab from Hamburg, and yes, Basil, I could be asked to get out of bed. Said in the Discord that this is your tech news every morning. Fab can be asked to get out of bed. Actually, had a pretty good track record. So far, I don't think I've skipped the show because I couldn't be asked to get out of bed. Only for legitimate work-related reasons. Anyway, yeah, let's get into it. Last day of the week. Some tech news. We're gonna start as usual. As usual, we're gonna start with coffee. To be honest. And oh, by the way, I realized in case just to make this clear, because of German advertising laws, I am not sponsored by Starbucks. I stole this cup in a Starbucks place about a decade ago, because it's nice and big. I like big cups, and I cannot lie. Anyway, yes. So we got coffee. Let's keep going, and we're gonna start, of course, with the trade war. That is presenting a big specter over all of technology right now. A big orange specter, as the register calls it. Yes, we're talking about President Trump. Interestingly, Lenovo is a Chinese company. Lenovo's pre-tax profits up 459%, a whopping 459% profits as well, over the fiscal year of 2019, which ended the 31st of March. Fiscal years, I don't understand. Anyway, they're making a lot of money, but they are warning their investors that quote, operating in this complex global environment, management of Lenovo will leverage its extensive experience in managing a multitude of macro risks, including policy including policy changes, and exercise sound judgment in evaluating options to further improve its worldwide manufacturing capabilities and supply chain flexibility. That sounds like they want to branch out from China because obviously of Trump banning all the Chinese manufacturers. It's interesting that Lenovo doesn't seem to be under as much scrutiny as Huawei is. Don't know if that will change. As soon as somebody tells Trump that his ThinkPad is actually made in China, things could change rapidly. Speaking of China, it's been reported that Apple is moving its manufacturing, or has started moving its manufacturing out of China. Rumors have it that this is production of MacBooks and iPads. So these reports say that in June already, the company that builds, manufactures stuff for Apple, called Pegatron, will start manufacturing in Indonesia. So lots of companies currently scrambling to get their manufacturing moved from China to adjacent regions where I guess the wages are as low and there's no union oversight either. So got that. Huawei, meanwhile, more problems because manufacturers that that Huawei depends on for their supply chain. So companies that basically send Huawei stuff to build their products with. From Japan have started basically boycotting Huawei, including Panasonic. And this is apparently because if you are a company, if you're a company producing products outside of China, but 25% of your of the worth of the product. I don't know how they calculate that, but if 25% of the worth of the product is from the US, you're also subject to these export controls in the US. So this might explain why ARM was also shifting. I was talking about that yesterday, which is a British company owned by a Japanese. Fuck, this global financial stuff gets complicated, doesn't it? So that might explain why they also complied with that order, because apparently you do not have to be an American company to fall under these restrictions. This is just getting out of hand, this trade war shit. Why don't they just stop? I need my electronics, guys. Speaking of things, why don't they just stop? It turns out, so the US government was charging Assange, Julian Assange, who's been kicked out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London and is currently in jail in the UK for jumping bail. The US government was going to charge him with unlawful intrusion into computer systems because he helped Chelsea Manning break into a computer to get some of these war logs. And it now turns out they're now charging him under the Espionage Act 18 times. So the Espionage Act is a law from 1917, I think. It's very strict, obviously wartime law. We're talking First World War here. So because 18 times, he's charged 18 times, I think there's a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison for each count. So he could be in jail 180 years. So this is we're talking possibly lifetime imprisonment here. Now this comes under very this is a problem. This is a problem for journalists especially, because I mean, okay, I'm gonna read out some stuff verbatim here from the Register because they wrote this down pretty nicely. So they're basically saying the US government has never charged a journalist under the Espionage Act for publishing classified info. So there's no clear precedent over the extent to which a journalist's work, including receiving and publishing confidential documents, is protected by the First Amendment. And they're saying, Assange is likely to argue that his actions were protected under the First Amendment if this goes to trial at some point. So there's going to be free speech issues there because they've never charged a journalist. So now they need to basically establish a precedent. Register goes on. However, the US government is likely to argue that Assange is not in fact a journalist, which is on one level is perfectly true. He does not act as a conventional journalist in that he doesn't produce or edit stories. But at the same time, many of the methods, is something I pointed out back when we talked about the Assange thing for the first time as well. But at the same time, many of the methods he employed to get hold of information made it publicly available are effectively the same, making it hard to draw a distinction. The US government has had years to explore the issue and presumably feels it has a winnable case against the controversial figure. I'm not sure I agree with that. They might just charge him for the publicity value. I mean, it would be bad if they lose, but still, it's not like they're losing. I mean, it's not like they have to pay their lawyers, their government employees anyway. The prosecutors. It is not clear where the Department of Justice will try to draw distinctions in the internet era between what the Fourth Estate does and what Assange and WikiLeaks have done. So they're basically saying, he helped Manning, so he is he's also can be charged for spying. Now this whole thing is gonna be problematic, and as the Register points out, I mean, this is gonna be closely watched because of the impact for journalists. So I mean, they're pointing out that the difference between classical journalists and what Assange does, for example, is that they're charging him with they're accusing him with having published all the names of the sources and intelligence officials and people in war in a war region, which is of course something that journalists don't do, and as the Register points out, that is an important distinction from journalists, but still, this is gonna get interesting. So the Register closes with whatever happens is certain to be very carefully watched and will likely have very significant implications in the future. The indictment of Julian Assange on the Espionage Act for publishing classified information is an attack on the First Amendment and a threat to all journalists everywhere who publish information that governments would like to keep secret, from the Committee to Protect Journalists Executive Director Joel Simon. Press freedom in the United States and around the world is imperiled by this prosecution. Yeah, it's just, I mean, to me it seems like even if they have a case or not, they're just trying to make an example of him. They could just as well just let this go. Because obviously, I mean, WikiLeaks, as I said in the past, exposed some really shitty things the American military did in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they could put themselves on the standpoint and say, yes, there was horrible stuff that was done. I mean, we don't agree with the way this was leaked, and we prosecuted Manning because of that, and that's. We could close that down after the presidential pardon. They're not doing that, but they could. And yeah, we could just leave it at that, and just have our military, have more oversight on our military, and we think this is not how a military of a democratic state should behave. But of course, the US is not doing that, and they're fighting this tooth and nail. So, I mean, one thing this does is it kind of vindicates Assange a little bit for, people have been criticizing him for just up and running and hiding in the embassy. But it now does seem like he had a point. The stuff that's happening is exactly what he said would happen and what he was afraid of. So they kind of vindicated him a little bit on that point. Anyway, moving on. Interpol, or was it Europol? Europol has closed down a cryptocurrency mixing service called bestmixer.io. Never heard of this. You always learn about the names only when they get closed down. This was mostly done by Dutch officials in the Netherlands and in Luxembourg. They're saying this cryptocurrency mixer channeled through it in a year about 200 million US dollars. So, a Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency mixes, basically. I mean, you are not, as this warning says on the closed down side, you are not anonymous. If you use cryptocurrency, obviously, you are not anonymous. I mean, you have like a wallet ID, right? And you can create as many wallet IDs as you want. So at this point, you're basically anonymous, because while people can exactly track where all the money goes in the system, they don't know which wallet address you yourself own. The problem comes when you're trying to get money out of the system. So at some point, let's say you are a criminal and you've amassed some, let's say, Bitcoins from, crypto Trojans, like, blackmail, basically. And now you wanna make money from that. You need to convert that to real money. And at that point, there will be an address, that you use in this transaction to get, let's say, US dollars. And because all the different interactions, all the payments are public, people can, if they trace that last address to you because you went to a service and got money out, and they got the records from that service or whatever, however they do that, if they trace that last address to you, they can trace all the payments back, right? They can say, okay, we know this address at that point actually got money from, like, crypto Trojans, and if we follow the money all the way, it goes to that address. So because Fab got the money out, he obviously is connected to that crypto Trojan. That is how it works, and that's where a mixing service comes in, where basically it's a big pool. It's a bit like the Tor, works a bit like the Tor network. You have a big pool of people, big pool of money. Everybody throws money in. It gets like tumbled. They're also called tumbling services. Gets tumbled, and then you get some money out. And because you get, like, you put money in and then you get money out, and they obviously take a fee for that, but you don't get the same. Like, you put an address in, you have several exit addresses usually, and because you don't get the same coins, you could actually get coins from other persons. It is traceable. It's very hard, but there are ways, with big data analysis and metadata analysis to figure this out, but it's very hard. Now, obviously, what the law enforcement people can do is they can just seize the domain, seize the servers, and now they have all this data, and I'm guessing, and because all the addresses are not exactly anonymous, they can probably trace a lot of it back. And since then, they're saying you're not anonymous, and they're like, oh, we got the data. It looks like they're doing that now. So I thought that was interesting. GitHub, obviously, code source, code. Oh God, I need more coffee. Source hosting or code hosting service, GitHub, has bought Dependabot and is integrating it into their service. Dependabot was a software that basically checks, if you have a GitHub repo, it automatically checks libraries if they're up to date and secure. So basically pretty much all software, especially open source software, is based on other software, has dependencies. And so this will check those dependencies, see, okay, let's say you use SSH in your project, and you have an SSH library, and they're like, okay, your SSH library is 2 versions out of date, so there's all these security vulnerabilities, and it does that automatically, and it generates, like, I think, pull requests for stuff, automatic pull requests. So that's interesting. They integrated that. They also introduced a beta system called GitHub Sponsors. It's a bit like Patreon for developers. So you can fund open source developers. It says here the Microsoft subsidiary will cover payment fees and match funding up to $5,000 during a developer's first year. Maybe I should get my Magic the Gathering app on GitHub so people can sponsor me. Anyway, so they got that. They have got some more improvements. They got, they announced this at like some conference, at like an event in Berlin. They have like no new maintainer role now. Interestingly, the register here in the end says, is GitHub leading developers to GitLab and other alternatives following its acquisition by Microsoft in October 2018. While there has been some movement, GitHub claims to be adding around 3 million repositories every month, 48% growth since a year ago. Organization accounts are 41% up over the same period, and there are now 36 million users in total. But since it's over a year and the acquisition was in October, we don't know yet. It's probably, it'll be next year until we know that, but by then it's probably, I don't know. I think people are still using GitHub to a big extent. I mean, there is some we talked about this, some danger that Microsoft is owning all the developer space, but there are alternatives, and GitHub still has a very nice interface. Having used GitLab and GitHub both recently, I must say, GitHub does have a nice interface. I found another interesting story I just wanted to mention quickly, just give you something to read if you want. Found this very interesting. So Golem had a story about, if you're German, you can read this. Sorry, it's a German story, but I'm summarizing it quickly. If you speak German, rather. It's a story about blue LEDs. So there are lots of claims recently that blue LEDs actually hurt your eyesight because they have a different light spectrum they emit than the old school lights we used for hundreds of years. It seems like that is not the case. Golem has a very interesting and long story here by an expert on the subject who goes into how this all works. And it's very interesting. So it boils down to the fact that yes, white light has like another spectrum, and there is danger with UV rays, but basically it's the same spectrum our sun has in the middle of the day. And there is obviously a problem if you look directly into the sun for more than a second. You can have problems, but these lights are not as bright, so their emissions aren't as, they don't hurt your eyes. Especially you have this reflex. I mean, grown-ups will not look into the light for long enough for the sun to hurt them. Generally, you have the reflex to close your eyes or avert your gaze, and you'd have the same with any light source, that would hurt your eyes in that way. And there's basically been studies done. And so it boils down to, yes, theoretically, if they're really bright LEDs with a lot of blue light, they would have an adverse effect, but only if you hold it like 20 meters or 20 centimeters, 10 to 20 centimeters in front of your eyes, and look at them for a prolonged amount of time. So like maybe 20 centimeters from your eye, and you look at it for 8 hours straight. Like that could possibly hurt your eyes, but it's not really, even then, there's scientists who looked at this didn't find any really significant danger. So it seems like blue LEDs are okay, but it's fascinating. If you speak German, this is a very interesting story you might want to read. It's called Schadet LED Licht unseren Augen on golem.de. I found that very interesting to read this morning. Even though obviously I'm still not completely awake, as you can probably tell, by me stumbling through these stories. And that's pretty much it for today. Just one little more thing I want to show you, because Amazon Video has put out a trailer for the new Picard Star Trek show, JLP, Jean-Luc Picard. And I just want to show you that trailer. It's about 1.5 minutes long, and after that I'm just gonna comment on it a little bit, and then we'll wrap up the show. So feast your eyes on the trailer for the new, outside of US and Canada, new Amazon Prime Video show featuring Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard. The end is only the beginning. So if you were listening to the podcast, just very quickly, basically it's the Picard family vineyard you see. And then you see some bottles of Chateau Picard from the Bourgogne, which is great. I hope they actually have branded wine. If they miss that opportunity, I'll be very sad. And then you see Patrick Stewart's face. So obviously Admiral now. I'm not quite sure. The greatest rescue armada in history. I think that's something new. Interesting. This all feels like... I like how they did the vineyard. It looks very much like that episode in Next Generation. I saw that recently. It was a great episode, by the way, with the mud fight with his brother. It looks like he's doing a Nathan Bridger. He's like secluded himself, not on a Caribbean island, but in this case, his family vineyard, and is now running it. I don't know what happened to his brother, but interesting. Also, in the end, you can see Patrick Stewart's face for a little bit, and he's now, he's famous as a man who hasn't aged in the last 30 years, visibly aged. You can see now he now has visibly aged. It's gonna be interesting. So the show's gonna be called Star Trek Picard. I have some hopes for it. I hope it's gonna be good. But I feel like it's a bit like it's the same writer's room as Discovery, and I've not been very hot with Discovery with the last season. I think.
New follower, Daddy _ Lucifer 6.
Daddy Lucifers. Oh, that's not at all. It's not at all. Scary. Anyway, yes. So I don't know. Anyway, it's a new Star Trek series. I got high hopes. So why not? Why not? I'll see it. It's Patrick Stewart. I really hope they do it justice. But I feel like Patrick Stewart probably will exert some grip on on the creative direction a little bit. As much of a Star Trek alumni as he is, and as much experience as he has in the business. I hope he can save them from the worst mistakes they made during Discovery. Anyway, I hope you have a nice weekend. I hope your weather is as good as it's over here. It's been really nice. And I'll see you on Monday, I'm guessing, if I can be asked to get out of bed. Until then, have a nice weekend, and live long and prosper, everybody.